A call came into a Durham, North Carolina 911 center just after 10 a.m.
911, where's your emergency?
The caller was a tenant at an apartment complex near the campus of North Carolina Central University.
Someone was leaving the apartment. As he was coming down the steps, he knows someone was laying at the bottom of the steps. He went and called 911.
I just walked out my apartment. She's at the bottom of the stairs, head busted up and blood everywhere. Is she conscious? Hey, baby girl. Hello?
You know, a lot of college kids live in this complex. So he didn't really think it strange to find somebody at the bottom of the steps. He figured the person was asleep.
When she didn't respond, the caller tried a different tack.
Do you want me to get her ID out?
He was going through her wallet to try to identify who this woman was laying on the floor.
Her name is Denita Smith. Denita.
A grad student who had spent 6 years at NCCU, Denita's name was well known on the college's Durham campus.
At 8:10 a.m. on a cold January morning, a single gunshot echoed through the campus crossing apartments in Durham, North Carolina. 25-year-old Denita Smith lay dying at the bottom of a staircase, a bullet lodged in the back of her head. She never saw her killer coming. She never knew that the man she planned to marry had been living a double life that would cost her everything. This is the story of how jealousy, obsession, and deadly secrets turned a promising young woman's dreams into her family's worst nightmare. Welcome back to Cold Crime Cases, where we dive deep into the most chilling mysteries and shocking betrayals that shake us to our core. I'm your host, and today we're uncovering a case that will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. But before we begin, I want to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Some people scroll by. You didn't. That means you care. Subscribing is free, but it helps uncover the next hidden case, before it happens again. This is the story of Denita Smith, a brilliant graduate student whose life was cut short by a web of lies so twisted, so devastating, that it would destroy not just one life, but shatter an entire family's faith in justice itself. Born on November 20, 1981, in Charlotte, North Carolina, Denita Smith entered this world as a beacon of light to her parents, Calvin and Shannon Smith. She was their precious daughter, joined by two siblings who would grow up knowing they had a sister destined for greatness. Shannon would later describe her daughter as the kind of child every parent dreams of: happy, obedient, never causing trouble, always wearing that infectious smile that could light up any room. But Denita was more than just a well-behaved child. There was something special about her, something that everyone who met her could sense immediately. She possessed that rare combination of intelligence, ambition, and genuine kindness that made her stand out in every crowd. At West Charlotte High School, she wasn't just another student going through the motions, she was already planning her future, already dreaming of the life she would build for herself. After graduation, Denita made the decision that would shape her destiny. She enrolled at North Carolina Central University in Durham, choosing to major in English. But this wasn't just about getting a degree. Denita had found her passion. Photography had captured her heart from childhood, and now she saw a way to combine her love of storytelling with her artistic vision. She dreamed of becoming a photojournalist, of traveling the world and telling stories that mattered. At NC Central, Denita flourished like never before. She joined Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, where she formed bonds that felt more like family than friendship. Her sorority sisters would later describe her as the kind of person who could lift your spirits just by walking into the room. She had this incredible ability to make everyone feel seen, valued, and loved. Her professors respected her dedication, her peers admired her talent, and everyone who knew her could see she was destined for something extraordinary. But it was during her time at NC Central that Denita's life would take a turn that seemed like a fairy tale at first, but would ultimately become her tragedy. She met Jermeir Stroud, a fellow student who seemed like everything a woman could want in a partner. Handsome, ambitious, kind, and attentive, he appeared to be the perfect complement to Denita's bright spirit. Their relationship became the stuff of campus legend. They were the it couple, the pair that everyone looked at and thought, that's what true love looks like. Denita would glow when she talked about Jermeir, telling her friends how thoughtful he was, how he supported her dreams, how he made her feel like she could conquer the world. Even Sharon, who admitted to being naturally protective of her daughter, found herself genuinely liking the young man who had captured Denita's heart. Years passed, and their love story continued to unfold like something from a romantic movie. Even when Jermeir moved to Greensboro to pursue his career as a police officer, their relationship not only survived but seemed to grow stronger. The distance couldn't diminish what they had, or so everyone believed. In November 2006, Jermeir took the next step that everyone had been expecting. He proposed to Denita, and she said yes with tears of joy streaming down her face. As 2006 came to an end, Denita's life looked absolutely perfect from the outside. She was finishing her master's degree, planning her wedding, and had even secured a fellowship with the New York Times, her dream job that would launch her career as a photojournalist. At just 25 years old, she had everything she had ever wanted: a promising career, a man she loved who loved her back, and the unwavering support of family and friends who believed in her. But perfection, as we know, is often an illusion. And the illusion that surrounded Denita's life was about to shatter in the most brutal way imaginable. What Denita didn't know, what she could never have imagined, was that the man she planned to spend her life with had been living a double life. While she was planning their future together, building dreams that included both of them, Jermeir was keeping secrets so dark, so devastating, that they would ultimately lead to her murder. As January 2007 began, Denita was buzzing with excitement about the new year. She was living in the Campus Crossing apartments in Durham, putting the finishing touches on her master's degree, and counting down the days until the spring semester began. Her family would later recall how happy she seemed during those first few days of January, how she couldn't stop talking about her plans for the fellowship, the wedding, and the beautiful life she saw stretching out before her. She had no idea that someone was watching her. Planning. Preparing to destroy everything she held dear. January 4, 2007, started like any other morning for Denita. She woke up in her apartment, probably thinking about the day ahead, maybe about Jermeir, maybe about the exciting opportunities that awaited her. She gathered her things, stepped out of her apartment, and began walking down the stairs that she had climbed hundreds of times before. She never made it to the bottom. At exactly 8:10 a.m., a maintenance worker at the Campus Crossing apartments heard a sound that would haunt him forever, a single gunshot that echoed through the complex like a death knell. He looked around, trying to locate the source of the sound, when he saw something that didn't make sense. A young woman was running toward the back of the building, toward the parking lot, but she was taking a strange route, one that anyone familiar with the complex would know was the long way around. The maintenance worker, confused by what he had witnessed, got in his car and drove closer to investigate. That's when he saw her, the same young woman, now sitting in a burgundy SUV, and she was falling apart. She was crying hysterically, her hands covering her mouth as if she had seen something so horrific that she couldn't process it. When he approached her car and asked if she had heard the gunshot, she could only nod, tears streaming down her face. She told him she was terrified of guns, that she lived in Building 1200, and that she was too upset to think straight. The maintenance worker, concerned for her well-being, told her to go home and wait while he called the police. But by the time the authorities arrived, the mysterious woman had vanished, leaving behind only questions that would soon unravel the most shocking betrayal imaginable. Here's something that will chill you to the bone. When police arrived that first time, they found no evidence of any crime. No body, no blood, no sign that anything violent had occurred. They took no report and left, assuming it was a false alarm or perhaps just construction noise that had been mistaken for gunfire. If only they had looked harder. If only they had searched more thoroughly. Because just 2 hours later, the horrible truth would be discovered. At 10 a.m., a neighbor was leaving his apartment to go to work when he noticed something odd on the staircase, personal belongings scattered down the steps as if someone had dropped them while hurrying. At first glance, it seemed innocent enough. Maybe someone had been carrying too much and lost their grip. But as his eyes followed the trail of belongings downward, his blood turned to ice. At the bottom of the staircase lay a body. A young woman, motionless, bleeding from her head. The neighbor could tell immediately that she wasn't breathing, that whatever had happened here was beyond help. With shaking hands, he dialed 911, his voice trembling as he tried to explain what he was seeing. The operator asked him to check for identification, and when he opened the purse that had been scattered with the other belongings, he found the ID that would break a family's heart forever. Denita Smith. The name meant nothing to him, but it meant everything to the people who loved her. In that 911 call, you can actually hear the neighbor calling Denita's name once he learns it from her ID, hoping against hope that she might respond. But Denita was already gone, her dreams and ambitions silenced forever by a single bullet to the back of her head. When Shannon Smith received the call that would destroy her world, she was told that her daughter had been in some kind of accident, that she was unconscious and they were trying to help her. Sharon, who lived 2 hours away in Charlotte, immediately got in her car and began the longest drive of her life, praying with every mile that her daughter would be okay. But knowing she wouldn't arrive for hours, she made a call that seemed logical at the time. She called Jermeir, Denita's fiancé, and asked him to get to Durham as quickly as possible. That phone call would later take on a significance that no one could have imagined. As Sharon raced toward Durham, not knowing that her daughter was already dead, detectives were arriving at the campus crossing apartments and making a discovery that would turn this from a tragic accident into a murder investigation. When they examined Denita's body more closely, they found the truth that would haunt everyone involved forever. She had been shot execution style in the back of the head. This was no accident. This was cold-blooded murder. The scene told a story of unimaginable cruelty. Denita had been walking down the stairs, probably thinking about her day ahead, when someone she likely never saw coming approached her from behind and fired a single shot into her head. She collapsed where she stood, her belongings scattering around her as she fell. It was quick, efficient, and absolutely ruthless. Robbery was immediately ruled out, nothing had been taken. Her purse was still there, her keys, everything of value remained untouched. This wasn't about money or material possessions. This was personal. This was about something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. One by one, the people who loved Denita began arriving at the campus crossing apartments, each hoping against hope that somehow there had been a mistake, that their beloved Denita was still alive. First came Edith, her best friend, who had been trying to reach Denita all morning and knew something was terribly wrong. Then Jermeir arrived, the concerned fiancé rushing to be by his girlfriend's side. Finally, Sharon arrived, a mother's worst nightmare about to become reality. It was Sharon who would have to hear the words that no parent should ever have to hear: "Your daughter has been murdered." In that moment, her life shattered into a million pieces that would never quite fit back together again. If you're still watching and haven't subscribed, I'm honestly curious, what's holding you back? Drop it in the comments. I actually want to know. As detectives began processing the crime scene and gathering evidence, they started building a timeline of events that would eventually reveal the shocking truth about what happened to Denita Smith. They spoke with Jermeir, who provided his information and answered their initial questions. As her fiancé, he would need to be ruled out as a suspect, but in those first hours after the discovery, detectives allowed him to return to Greensboro. What they didn't know was that the case had already begun to solve itself, thanks to that maintenance worker who had witnessed something crucial that morning. His description of the mysterious woman in the burgundy SUV would become the thread that, when pulled, would unravel the entire deadly conspiracy that had cost Denita her life. The maintenance worker described the woman as approximately 5 feet 10 inches with a ponytail, driving a burgundy SUV and acting hysterically after hearing the gunshot. Initially, detectives believed she might have been an eyewitness to the murder, someone who could provide crucial information about what she had seen. They had no idea that they were actually looking for the killer herself. The breakthrough came the next day, January 5, 2007, when Jermeir called the lead detective with information that he claimed might be helpful. He had heard that police were looking for a burgundy SUV, and he knew someone who drove a vehicle matching that description. That someone was Shannon Crawley, a 911 dispatcher from Greensboro who had a history with Jermeir that Denita never knew existed. When Jermeir returned to Durham for formal questioning, the story he told detectives would crack this case wide open and reveal the deadly love triangle that had been hidden beneath the surface of what everyone believed was a perfect relationship. Jermeir admitted to detectives that he had been having an affair with Shannon Crawley. It had started back in 2004 when he encountered her again after meeting her years earlier at the police academy. Shannon was beautiful, he explained, and despite being in a committed relationship with Denita, he couldn't resist the temptation. He began living a double life that would ultimately prove fatal for the woman he claimed to love. For over a year, Jermeir had been seeing both women simultaneously. Shannon knew about Denita. She had even seen photographs of her when she helped Jermeir move, but Denita remained completely unaware that the man she planned to marry was betraying her in the worst possible way. The relationship between Jermeir and Shannon was intense and complicated, involving an unplanned pregnancy that ended in abortion and emotions that ran deep on both sides. According to Jermeir, the affair had ended in January 2006, more than a year before Denita's murder. He claimed that Shannon had become obsessive, unable to accept that their relationship was over. But was that really the truth? Or was there something more sinister lurking beneath the surface of this love triangle? When detectives drove to Greensboro to interview Shannon Crawley, they encountered a woman who appeared cooperative and polite on the surface. She confirmed having a relationship with Jermeir and corroborated much of his story about when it had ended. When asked about her whereabouts on the morning of the murder, she provided what seemed like a straightforward alibi. She had taken her son to a doctor's appointment, which made her late for work. But Shannon made two claims that would later prove to be crucial lies. She told detectives that she had never been to Durham, and she insisted that she hated guns so much that she would never own one. These statements would come back to haunt her as the investigation deepened. As the detective was leaving Shannon's workplace, something happened that would change the entire trajectory of the case. A coworker slipped him a note, indicating that he had information that might be relevant to the investigation. What that coworker revealed would expose Shannon's lies and reveal a pattern of behavior that painted her in a completely different light. The coworker told detectives that Jermeir had been calling Shannon at work for months, harassing her and making her fear for her life. Shannon had confided that Jermeir would show up at her house at all hours of the night, always carrying his gun, behaving in ways that made her genuinely afraid. Concerned for her safety, the coworker had actually sold Shannon a .38 caliber handgun and taught her how to use it for protection. This revelation was devastating to Shannon's credibility for multiple reasons. First, she had just told detectives that she hated guns and would never own one, a statement that was now proven to be a lie. Second, she had failed to mention being afraid of Jermeir despite allegedly fearing for her life for months. And third, the weapon she had purchased was the same caliber as the one that had killed Denita Smith. When detectives called Jermeir back for a second interview on January 6, 2007, and asked him about the harassment allegations, he denied them completely. He claimed Shannon had no reason to be afraid of him and that he had never threatened her. But when they asked him if he thought Shannon was capable of murder, his answer was chilling in its simplicity: yes. This took me hours of painful research, reading autopsies, police files, and the cries of mothers that were ignored. If you felt safe watching from your screen, the least you can do is hit that red subscribe button. The evidence against Shannon began mounting at an alarming rate. When detectives returned to show the maintenance worker her photograph, he couldn't definitively identify her as the woman he had seen that morning. However, when shown a picture of her burgundy SUV, he was absolutely certain it was the same vehicle. Even more damning was his description of what the woman had been wearing, a shirt with patches on it, which matched exactly the uniform worn by 911 dispatchers at Shannon's workplace. The timeline was also problematic for Shannon. Her supervisor confirmed that she had clocked in at 10 a.m. on the morning of the murder, giving her just enough time to drive from Durham back to Greensboro. The drive between the two cities was approximately 2 hours, and the timing lined up perfectly with someone who could have committed murder in Durham and still made it back to work on time. But perhaps the most damaging evidence came from Shannon's own cell phone records. Remember, she had told detectives that she had never been to Durham. When investigators pulled her phone records, they discovered this was another lie. The day before Denita's murder, Shannon's cell phone had pinged off a tower just 100 feet away from where Denita lived. This revelation led police to theorize that Shannon had conducted surveillance on Denita the day before the murder, scoping out her routine and planning the attack that would take place the following morning. The premeditation evident in this behavior painted a picture of a calculated killer who had carefully orchestrated every detail of her victim's death. When Shannon's car was impounded and tested for gunshot residue, the results were devastating to any remaining claims of innocence. Tests on the steering wheel and gear shift came back positive for gunshot residue, providing physical evidence that connected Shannon directly to the weapon used to kill Denita. The final nail in Shannon's coffin came when detectives verified her alibi about taking her son to the doctor. When they contacted the doctor's office, they were told that Shannon had never shown up for that appointment. Another lie, another piece of evidence that she had been exactly where the cell phone records indicated she was, in Durham, stalking and ultimately murdering an innocent woman whose only crime was being engaged to a man who couldn't remain faithful. 5 days after Denita Smith was found dead at the bottom of those stairs, Shannon Crawley was arrested and charged with her murder. But the question that haunted everyone involved in the case was simple: why? What could possibly motivate a woman to commit such a horrific act of violence? The answer, according to investigators, lay in the twisted psychology of obsession and jealousy that had consumed Shannon completely. They believed she had never truly accepted that her relationship with Jermeir was over, and when she learned about his engagement to Denita, something inside her snapped. According to police theory, Shannon had purchased a house just minutes away from where Jermeir lived, demonstrating the lengths she was willing to go to remain close to him. The breaking point allegedly came on Christmas Eve when Shannon saw Jermeir and Denita together at church, seeing for the first time the engagement ring that symbolized her worst fears coming true. Shannon's family vehemently disputed this version of events, insisting that she wasn't even at church that Christmas Eve and that it was actually Jermeir who had been obsessing over Shannon, not the other way around. They painted a picture of a man who couldn't accept rejection and who had used his position as a police officer to intimidate and terrorize their daughter. But investigators didn't buy this alternative narrative. Too much evidence pointed directly at Shannon, and her pattern of lying during the investigation had destroyed any credibility she might have had. Released on bail while awaiting trial, Shannon seemed determined to prove her innocence by any means necessary. In May 2007, 5 months after Denita's murder, she contacted Durham police and claimed she was ready to tell them the truth about what happened on January 4. The story Shannon told during this interview was dramatically different from anything she had said before, and it painted Jermeir as a controlling, violent man who had forced her to participate in Denita's murder against her will. According to her new version of events, Jermeir had been stalking and threatening her since their relationship ended, and the situation had escalated to the point where she feared for her life and the lives of her children. Shannon claimed that on January 3, 2007, she had come home to find Jermeir waiting in her bedroom. He allegedly threatened her with a gun and forced her to drive with him to Durham that night to scope out Denita's apartment. The next morning, she said, he returned and again forced her at gunpoint to drive him to Durham, where he murdered Denita while Shannon waited in the car. These cases remind us how dangerous the world can be. That's why I created a survival guide that shows you real safety strategies drawn from true crime stories. Check out True Crime Survival Guide. The link is waiting for you in the description and pinned comment. It was a compelling story that, if true, would completely exonerate Shannon and place all the blame on Jermeir. But detectives and prosecutors weren't buying it. Shannon had already been caught in too many lies, and this new story seemed like a desperate attempt to save herself from a murder conviction. To support her claims, Shannon provided investigators with audio recordings that she said proved Jermeir was still threatening her. She claimed these recordings captured him warning her not to cooperate with police and making threats against her safety. But when prosecutors listened to the tapes, they immediately noticed something crucial: the voice on the recordings didn't sound anything like Jermeir. Instead of helping her case, the fake recordings only served to further destroy Shannon's credibility and convince prosecutors that they had the right person. Her attempts to frame Jermeir were becoming increasingly desperate and obvious. But Shannon wasn't finished trying to destroy the man she claimed had destroyed her life. In June 2008, while still awaiting trial, she contacted Charlotte police and reported that Jermeir had driven to her parents' house and raped her. She claimed he had attacked her with a knife, cutting off her clothes and assaulting her violently. When police arrived, they did find lacerations on Shannon's neck and thigh, lending some credibility to her story. However, when she was taken to the hospital for a rape kit examination, the results came back negative. There was no evidence of sexual assault, and the cuts on her body were superficial, not deep enough to require the stitches she insisted she needed. The investigation into the alleged rape revealed more of Shannon's deception. She told police they should check Jermeir's trash can for the knife used in the attack. 3 days later, Jermeir was taking out his trash when he discovered a knife at the bottom of his empty can. He immediately called police, who interviewed his neighbors and learned that someone had been seen placing something in the trash can a few nights earlier. When detectives checked Jermeir's cell phone records, they determined he wouldn't have had enough time to make the 120-mile trip to Charlotte and back while maintaining his normal schedule. The alleged rape, like so many of Shannon's other claims, was revealed to be another fabrication designed to make Jermeir look guilty. Despite all of Shannon's attempts to point the finger at Jermeir, the charges against her remained firm. In February 2010, more than 3 years after Denita's murder, Shannon Crawley's trial finally began. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman consumed by jealousy and obsession, someone who simply couldn't accept that the man she wanted had chosen someone else. They argued that Shannon had stalked both Jermeir and Denita, that she had planned the murder carefully, and that she had executed it without mercy or remorse. Jermeir testified at the trial, describing the months leading up to the murder and the increasingly erratic behavior he claimed to have witnessed from Shannon. Prosecutors presented evidence of her lies, her fake recordings, her false rape accusation, and the physical evidence that connected her to the crime scene. The defense fought back by trying to convince the jury that Jermeir was the real killer, that he had manipulated Shannon and used her as a scapegoat for his own crimes. Shannon took the stand in her own defense, repeating her claims about being forced to participate in the murder against her will. But the evidence was overwhelming. Even though much of it was circumstantial, it painted a clear picture of Shannon's guilt that the defense simply couldn't overcome. The jury was allowed to hear the audio recordings Shannon had created, and they could judge for themselves whether the voice on the tape sounded like Jermeir. After just a couple of weeks of testimony, the jury reached their verdict. On February 22, 2010, Shannon Crawley was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Shannon's parents continue to maintain their daughter's innocence to this day. They believe there was a conspiracy to frame her and that Jermeir is the real killer who somehow escaped justice. But the legal system has spoken, and Shannon remains behind bars for the rest of her life. For Denita's family, the conviction brought a sense of closure, but it could never bring back the daughter, sister, and friend they had lost. Justice had been served in the legal sense, but there is no real justice when someone is murdered for such a senseless reason. Imagine if it was your daughter, your sister, or your friend. Would you want their story buried under noise, or told with care? Subscribing helps make sure no child's story fades away. Denita Smith was a young woman who had made all the right choices in life. She was educated, ambitious, kind, and surrounded by people who loved her. She was planning a future filled with promise and possibility, completely unaware that the man she trusted with her heart was living a double life that would ultimately cost her everything. The tragedy of Denita's story isn't just that she died so young, but that she died because of someone else's inability to handle rejection and jealousy. Shannon Crawley's obsession with Jermeir Stroud created a deadly triangle that had only one possible resolution in her twisted mind: the elimination of her perceived rival. What makes this case even more heartbreaking is that Denita probably never even saw it coming. She walked down those stairs that morning thinking about her day ahead, maybe about her upcoming wedding, maybe about her fellowship with the New York Times. In a split second, all of those dreams and plans were ended by a single gunshot fired by a woman who felt entitled to a man's love, even when that love was never truly hers to begin with. Jermeir Stroud testified that he felt embarrassed and guilty about cheating on Denita, and well, he should. His inability to remain faithful to the woman he claimed to love created the circumstances that led to her murder. While Shannon Crawley pulled the trigger, Jermeir's betrayal was the foundation upon which this tragedy was built. The lessons we can learn from Denita's story are numerous and painful. We learn about the danger of secrets in relationships, about how jealousy can transform seemingly ordinary people into killers, and about how the people we trust most can sometimes be harboring darkness we never imagined possible. We also learn about the importance of paying attention to warning signs, about taking threats seriously even when they come from unexpected sources, and about the reality that violence can touch anyone's life regardless of how careful they are or how many right choices they make. But most importantly, we learn about remembering the victims of these senseless crimes not just as statistics or case studies, but as real people with real dreams and real families who loved them. Denita Smith was more than just the victim of a love triangle gone wrong. She was a daughter who made her parents proud, a sister who brought joy to her siblings, a friend who was always there when needed, and a young woman whose potential was limitless. Her sorority sisters remember her infectious smile and generous spirit. Her professors remember her dedication and talent. Her family remembers the little girl who loved cameras and dreamed of telling stories that would change the world. These memories are what matter most, not the circumstances of her death but the beauty of her life. If you love true crime but also want to learn how to protect yourself, I've written a book just for you. It's called True Crime Survival Guide: How to Stay Safe in a Dangerous World. You can grab your copy now through the link in the description and the pinned comment. As we close this tragic chapter, we must remember that Denita Smith's story didn't end with her murder. It continues through the memories of everyone who loved her, through the impact she had on their lives, and through the lessons we can learn from the circumstances that led to her death. Her family continues to honor her memory by speaking about her life, not just her death. They want the world to know that she was intelligent, ambitious, kind, and full of love for the people around her. They want her to be remembered as someone who had so much to offer the world, someone whose loss diminished all of us. Shannon Crawley sits in prison today, serving a life sentence for her crimes. She has lost her freedom, her children, and any chance of the life she might have built if she had chosen a different path. Her obsession and jealousy didn't just destroy Denita's life, they destroyed her own life as well. Jermeir Stroud must live with the knowledge that his infidelity contributed to the death of the woman he claimed to love. While he didn't pull the trigger, his betrayal set in motion the events that led to that fatal morning in January 2007. That burden will be with him for the rest of his life. The ripple effects of violence extend far beyond the immediate victim. Denita's parents lost their daughter, their dreams for her future, and their faith that good people are safe from evil. Her siblings lost their sister and the aunt their children will never know. Her friends lost someone who brought light into their lives, and the world lost whatever contributions she might have made through her work as a photojournalist. But perhaps the most important lesson from Denita's story is this: love should never be about possession or control. True love wants the best for the other person, even if that means letting them go. Shannon Crawley's version of love was really about ownership, about feeling entitled to someone who had chosen to be with someone else. That twisted version of love, combined with jealousy and obsession, created a perfect storm that ended in murder. If we can learn anything from this tragedy, it should be to recognize the warning signs of unhealthy obsession, to take threats seriously even from people we think we know, and to understand that the most dangerous person in any situation is often someone who feels they have nothing left to lose. Denita Smith deserved so much more than the life she got. She deserved to graduate with her master's degree, to marry the man she loved, to pursue her career with the New York Times, and to live the full, rich life she had planned for herself. She deserved to grow old surrounded by family and friends, to achieve the dreams she had worked so hard toward, and to make the positive impact on the world that everyone knew she was capable of making. Instead, her life was cut short by jealousy, betrayal, and violence. But her memory lives on, and her story serves as both a tribute to the person she was and a warning about the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected places. Rest in peace, Denita Smith. Your family will never stop loving you, your friends will never stop missing you, and your story will never be forgotten. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Cold Crime Cases. If this story affected you the way it affected me, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Share this video with someone who needs to hear Denita's story, and let me know in the comments what case you'd like me to cover next. Remember, these aren't just stories, they're real lives, real families, and real tragedies that deserve to be told with respect and remembered with honor. Until next time, stay safe out there, and never forget that the most important thing we can do for victims like Denita is to make sure their stories are never forgotten. Subscribe to Cold Crime Cases, and together we'll continue shining light on the cases that need to be told.